Welcome back, fellow Nerf herders, to our Star Wars Plus review of The Bad Batch, titled
I have a Bad Batch feeling about this.
And today, we're gonna wreck it! Yes, we finally broke down and we bought a toy. Specifically, we got Wrecker.
Well, we just happened to find it.
Yeah, we found him and the rest of the batch in like a CVS, and I'm like, you know what? This is fate. We're meant to buy him. Yeah, Wrecker's easily like my favorite character now. I love him so much. Like,
ditto.
Don't get me wrong, I love the rest of the batch, but Wrecker just like I have a soft spot for him.
Wrecker is an adorable cinnamon bun.
Yes, he must be protected at all costs, even though he could easily annihilate everyone who comes after him. He'll be on the wall of honor like with the rest of our lovelies behind us.
Cha-cha.
And today, we bring you the two-part of a three-part finale of Season 1 of Bad Batch. Oh boy, was it a doozy.
So we have Return to Kamino and Kamino Lost. This officially signals the end of the clone era. We are done with clones.
Like, we thought it was over, you know, with Order 66 in Episode 3, but this, I think, feels more official, because this is when Kamino, at least the part that we know of where the clones were made, has been completely destroyed. Hey, and I never thought I'd feel sad about that. One thing we should note real quick, we have finally, at long last, watched all of Clone Wars.
And we are going to have ourselves a discussion on that. We got some problems with you people, and you're gonna hear about it! But we also have some good things to say, but...
Yeah.
Point is, yeah, we are gonna do another video where we discuss our thoughts on Clone Wars.
Yeah, because before Return to Kamino happened, we were thinking to ourselves, you know, we're really close to polishing off Clone Wars. God forbid something happens in the last two episodes that we desperately need context for. We should probably finish that before going to the rest of this. And I'm kind of glad we did, because it definitely changed my thoughts on a few things in regards to these two episodes. But before we get into any of that, we should go over the two episodes themselves.
We also want to mention, this is not the end of Bad Batch. We are getting a Season 2!
Yes, thank God. I had been wondering that myself, because I'm like, where exactly are they going to go with this? Is there going to be enough to warrant a Season 2? But given all that we've seen in Clone Wars, given everything that hadn't exactly wrapped up or had a proper ending, I do think there's a lot they can do in Season 2.
Yeah, they've basically got about 2 decades of material to play around with, you know, up until Rebels, and even then, they could even go past Rebels.
Yeah, they can do more foreshadowing for Rebels if they wanted to.
Yeah.
But yeah, these two seasons are crucial, though. Again, this signifies the end of an era in a big way. So yeah, last time in our review, we ended off with the Batch going to rescue the clone trooper Gregor, but then losing Hunter in the midst of it, who ends up getting captured by the Empire and Crosshairs, and then being returned to Kamino. So this episode starts off with the Batch locating him at Kamino, because Crosshairs, you know, he wants the whole group there. He knows they're going to go after him. So he purposely makes sure that they can track him. Thankfully, Omega happens to know a secret way into the city, and it's in a secret facility that Nala Se had that apparently not even Tech knew about. It was completely secret, and there's all these secret tunnels and stuff that aren't on any of the maps. So I thought that was rather interesting, and I mean, it kind of works with Kamino's whole deal, because we know that they keep tons of secrets, and this just adds to the list. We also find out that the lab that they go to after landing is actually the lab that they were technically created in, or at least they were experimented on and had their abilities enhanced. It's also where Omega was created, and that's how she actually got to know the Batch, because you would think that, you know, she'd be used to seeing all these clone troopers even if she was kept in a private facility, but in this case we find out that she personally got to see the Batch as they were being created, because they do reveal that she actually is older than them, which makes sense.
Which is not really surprising.
Yeah, it makes sense, because if she's an unaltered clone, like, she's probably like 8 at the youngest, I guess, 10 or 12 at the most.
She's got to be somewhere close to Boba's age.
Yeah, and the others obviously are like the other clones in that they have enhanced aging, so they could probably be like 2 years old for all we know.
Precocious little scamps, ain't they?
But the point is, they're like the only ones that like she kind of developed a connection to, because she got to see them grow up, and she made it her mission, when she finally did get to join the rest of the clones, that she would try to get to know them personally. So now this explains why she sought them out specifically in the beginning, and she also happens to know how to get through to where they need to find Hunter. Oh, along the way, they actually run into a familiar face. Is it Easy?
Mm-hmm. The droid from the
medical facility?
Yeah.
Yeah, we saw him in the beginning, but I didn't realize his significance until we watched Clone Wars, so I know that he was there through a lot more stuff, although I'm sure he doesn't remember it because of, tinkering and whatnot. They manage to get into the city. They try to sneak up so they can, get Hunter without anyone seeing them. But, of course, Crosshairs knows exactly what they're going to do, and he springs a trap on them. And, of course, he's bitter as all hell, just unloading upon them all of his anger. Yeah, he's all like, oh, you betrayed me. You left me behind. You weren't loyal to me. And part of me was like, dude, you have some friggin' nerve, because you were trying to kill them. And granted, it was under the influence of the chip, but, dude, you still tried to kill them. And they even make that point, too. It's like, what could they really have done? Not only was he trying to kill them, so was everybody else in the facility. The thing is, after we watched Clone Wars, I kind of rethought that a bit, and I started to see his point a little bit. When you think about it, the Batch for the entire season has been doing what they should have done with Crosshairs. They've been going into these really dangerous situations to rescue people, some of who they don't even know, putting it all on the line just to get them out safely. It's like, if they can do it with them, why couldn't they have done it with Crosshairs? Because, they rescued Gregor and they didn't even know who he was. And I know, technically he's their brother or whatever, but even so, at no point did they really try to, launch a mission to rescue him. And you don't really realize that he probably was, subconsciously waiting for them to do so. While, yes, again, that would have been a suicide mission, at the same time, I reason that they're the Bad Batch. They've gone into dangerous situations like this before, even more so, and come out successful. They technically could have done it if they tried. I kind of compare it to the end of Clone Wars, when the troopers turned on Ahsoka. Despite the fact that her own former troop had turned on her and she had people blasting at her everywhere with only lightsabers to defend herself, she still was able to get a hold of Rex and undo his chip. So I'm like, if she can do that, why can't the Batch do that for Crosshairs? Am I wrong?
I don't know, because there was always that touch of Crosshairs being the obedient soldier, even when his chip wasn't active.
Right.
So it's kind of a catch-22, and especially given what he tells us later that, oh, I had my chip removed a long time ago, which confuses the hell out of me.
Yeah, that was the big shocking moment, because the whole time the Batch thought that Crosshairs was doing this because of the inhibitor chip. That makes sense. We've seen it happen in Clone Wars, in the movies. Even these soldiers who were completely loyal to their commanders, to their Jedi friends and everything, the second that order went out, they turned like that. So you think it's the same thing here, but then Crosshairs is like, oh no, I knew what I was doing this whole time. And it's like, so, wait, when did that happen exactly? And they even ask him that, and he's like, does it matter? And I'm like, yeah! Can you give us a time frame here? Because I have had a few questions about that. First off, how was the Empire able to enhance his chip if it wasn't there? Because keep in mind that he was the only one they decided to actually dial it up to 11, because he showed the most potential out of all of them. And then I think experimented on him again even later on after he came back from that mission. So if his chip wasn't there, what were they doing exactly?
Unless he was pretending.
Yeah, but they had he was in a machine. They were scanning his head and everything. Just, how did that happen? I saw some people on posts were talking about how potentially he could have had his chip removed when he got burned, when he tried to incinerate them in that giant engine back on that scrap heap planet.
Yep.
Which, yeah, that makes sense, because his whole side was burned. It stands to reason he could have hit his head as well, just like Wrecker did, and it just got,
Yeah, but the way he tells it, it's he did it a long time ago, and that incident was pretty recent.
I don't know how time works in this world. Trust me, we've tried to figure it out and we can't. So that could have happened like months ago for all we know. But the sequence of episodes, it made it feel like it was a lot more recent than he was letting on to. Because I'm wondering, like, if he had it removed of his own volition, first off, how did he know it was there? How did he know it would cause him to turn once the order was given out? And how did he know how to remove it? Because keep in mind, before this all went down, the only people who knew about the chips, aside from the obvious Palpatine and his minions, was Anakin and Rex. And eventually Ahsoka, when she saw Rex give his records, because it was, the clone, was it Fives?
Yeah, 5-2.
Yeah. He's the one who cracked open this whole conspiracy and brought it to light. And technically, the Jedi all knew about it, and that's a point of contingency we're going to talk about.
Again, yeah, we're going to talk about that in the whole video, yeah.
But the point is, like, most of the clones don't even know about this. So how the hell did Crosshairs figure it out? Because, like, I can't imagine Rex would have, like, casually dropped something like that around him, and I don't even know what other clones would have known about either, if Rex told anybody, or if maybe after a certain point it all became common knowledge. But yeah, I can't wrap my head around the time frame. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, the closest thing, again, is when he got burned. That's the only logical time. And again, I wonder how long that was that he considers it that long ago. But I guess the ultimate point we're making out of all this is that Crosshairs is an asshole.
Yeah.
We finally got to the final season.
Where the Bad Batch is introduced.
So we got to know them before everything went down in this series. And yeah, Crosshairs was definitely an asshole in that episode. But he is still on their side. He's still a good guy. And he was a damn good sniper. Like, holy shit, the scene where he took out all those guys in that hallway just by placing up those mirrors, like, that was genius. And he showed it off again in these last 2 episodes, where he sniped all those guys at once in the training room, and then again at the end of the last episode. I'm like, damn, boy. But yeah, despite his badassery, ultimately, he chose to join the Empire of his own volition, because he believed in their cause, he believed he was more suited for it, and that it would fulfill his whole entire purpose for being made. Because there had to be a reason the Empire made this special group of clones with enhanced abilities. And it wasn't just for special op missions or whatever. It was basically to be like their personal assassination group. And I know the Empire has like several groups of various types, like with the Sith and everything, but you know that was like their main purpose ultimately.
But on the other hand, there is also this contradiction of him. How is he so gung-ho about the Empire when he kind of undermines them constantly, and he doesn't play well with others except for the Bad Batch? Like, he frequently knocks off his own teammates.
I mean, we know Crosshairs is in it for himself, and he obviously has a superiority complex. As he even said, like, we're obviously superior to these other clones. So he has a whole sense of grandeur about him. So that makes sense that he wouldn't really value anyone else who was, like, below him. I did see this one video after we watched that episode. It was from this guy, I think his name was called Geeksy or something. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. He was talking about how this whole turn with Crosshairs actually following Order 66 because he wanted to, of joining the Empire because he wanted to, was actually a good thing and undid a major issue that he had with the Clone Wars. Because in his opinion, he says that inhibitor chips never should have been a thing with the troopers, because that meant that they killed all the Jedi and all the people that were against the Empire because they were forced to. That made them basically victims in everything, even the ones that appeared in the movies. It kind of like subverts that, the whole thing that, oh, they're just bad guy minions, they're evil or whatever. It makes them into mindless slaves, basically, and it makes you like kind of feel bad that they're actually getting killed by the heroes. I get it, like that adds a more even tragic aspect to what is basically a tragic space opera, but again, it kind of undermines the whole thing with the clones, because like, I know they wanted to, like, really not make them bad, because they put so much effort in the Clone Wars into humanizing the clones, giving them their own personalities, and making you like them and care about them when they actually die. But you do it to the point where it almost doesn't make sense for them to continue following the Empire after they form these close bonds with the Jedi and these Republic officers and so on and so forth. So obviously brainwashing is the only way to go. But in this case with Crosshairs, it shows that even though, yes, he was technically mind-controlled for a time, ultimately he still believes in the whole concept of the Empire. And in fact, they show as well the new recruits. They reveal why they follow the Empire, why they choose to do so, that they get something out of it that they never got with the Republic. In that aspect, I do kind of agree. While I don't think Crosshair's whole turn and reveal was made much sense in the context of both the shows, I think it really was needed.
No.
You don't agree?
No, I agree. Again, I want to talk more regarding the chips in our Clone Wars discussion. But yeah, no, I'm in agreement that the chips are kind of a stupid concept. I feel like when you have, episode 3, you do see some genuine emotion to some of the clones who have to turn against the Jedi, and you can see it's really hard for them to do this, but they know they have to. And so it's either you have the clones that are I'm sorry about this, or you have the ones that don't even talk because what really can they say, and that's gonna make it even harder for them to actually have to talk to the Jedi, to their targets. And yeah, I do feel like having the inhibitor chip thing, it cheapens it a lot, and it just seems like an easy out, but it doesn't really line up with anything. And again, I probably talked a little more than I intended to, but I have more to say on that, but we'll save that.
Right. So while all that drama's going on, Hunter had noticed that there was a lot less clones around, that there was a lot less Kaminoans hanging around too. Just the whole place seemed deserted.
Oh yeah, and the Empire's being rather cryptic. They're saying, it doesn't really matter, if they're not going to follow orders, it won't be a problem for much longer anyway. We won't be worried about them. We're going to be taking care of things.
Yeah, we ultimately find out that they've completely abandoned the facility. They took Nala Se and all the other essential scientific personnel to their headquarters, basically got whatever they found useful off of that facility, off of that planet, all for the purpose of destroying it. When the batch first arrives on the planet, they notice there's only 3 destroyers hanging out in the atmosphere. And the reason is because that's all they need to just completely blow the shit out of that facility. And it was the way it was framed, this was a tragedy. I didn't even think I would feel this bad about this facility being destroyed, because on the one hand, it's technically an evil facility. They are churning out these cloned human beings for the purpose of sending them to war, to sending them to their deaths, all to be part of a grand army that ultimately takes over the universe for the worst.
At the same time, though, the Clone Wars series and with Bad Batch, we've gotten to know these characters, these soldiers, these clones, and seeing this is their home.
For better or worse, it's their home. It's where they were created. It's where they grew up, where they trained, where they formed bonds as brothers. Seeing all that just destroyed, that was heart-wrenching. And you can especially see it in the face of Omega, because that's all she ever knew before she left the planet with the Bad Batch. And like I said, for us fans who've been watching it, I know we didn't grow up with the series like other people did, but I've seen comments from people, and they were saying how they were crying during that scene, because they said it was basically the end of their childhood to see the facility they watched 7 seasons of characters hanging out at just gone.
I also want to mention too, and I brought this up earlier in our series of reviews, this effectively renders one of the Star Wars legends now non-canon. The, original Battlefront 2 game, the campaign where the 501st is on Kamino, this basically makes it so that that fight does not happen.
I mean, that's always been the problem with Star Wars, though, is they're always retconning their own continuity. And I mean, while this technically fits into what happens between Clone Wars and Rebels, and I guess the movies, at the same time, I know it's gonna, like, undo a whole bunch of other stuff, like you said, specifically the games and whatever novels or comics, whatever else takes place outside of the legit continuity.
I feel like this is effectively being silently run by George Lucas. Another of his special edition trilogy treatments where he has to retcon everything he's already written into existence.
That's the whole purpose of the Clone Wars series when you think about it, though. It's to retcon and fix the plot holes of the first 2 movies that he was in charge of that have such badly written dialogue and plot holes and inconsistencies and so on and so forth. It's to, like, make things make sense by the time we get to Revenge of the Sith, even though some of it still doesn't really make sense. But again, we'll get into that in the
It's like,
video.
yeah, it might be Filoni in control, at least in the credits, but this really stinks of George Lucas. Not gonna lie.
I mean, what were they really gonna do with the facility, though? Because I know they continue the whole thing with cloning, obviously, because we got Snoke in the future movies and all the books and comics that have clones of Palpatine and so on and so forth. We know that's a thing, but it's like, did they really need an entire facility for that? And if they were so hell-bent on replacing the clones with regular troopers, like, they really didn't need it anymore.
I mean, if it hadn't taken them so long to see what was going on, what the Empire intended to do all along, they probably would have moved everything to another facility and found another client.
I mean, I doubt it, because Palpatine wouldn't want that technology falling into anyone else's hands, and we've seen what he does to anybody who tries to mess with his plans.
For all we know, hey, in another timeline, they could have moved up and helped out the rebels.
Yeah, it's possible.
They could have allied with the Alliance.
But that would have made him a liability, like...
What do they have to lose? What do they have to gain? They're already losing.
Like, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about for the purpose of Palpatine keeping them around. For them to still exist. Like, he would have to allow them to exist.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If Lama Su had figured out what was going to happen much earlier and been better about planning his escape, who knows what could have happened?
I still reason Palpatine would have hunted him down. Probably would have killed the entire race if they tried to, like, escape, because then he'd see them, the entire planet, the entire people, as a liability and not want any of them to share any of their knowledge with anyone regarding that.
I mean, ultimately it is a very hypothetical, and we're already at this point, so what does it matter? But, Marvel's What If.
Yeah. Star Wars What If.
It's Star Wars What If.
Let's just fuck up the continuity even more than it already is. But anyway, so, yeah, unfortunately, the batch, including Crosshairs, are all trapped on Kamino.
On the Poseidon.
Yeah. Yeah, suddenly this turns into, like, 3 different disaster movies. First you got your Titanic, where they're trapped on a sinking building as it's slowly filling up with water and they're trying to escape the compartment. Then it turns into Poseidon, where they're stuck at the bottom and they have to, like, make their way back up. And then it turns into friggin' Deep Blue Sea with a giant monstrosity trying to, like, eat them through the tubes.
For some reason.
Because giant monster's gonna eat. Deep Blue Sea, he ate me! A fucking shark ate me! Drink, bitch! Yeah, but thankfully, with the help of Easy and Mega's knowledge of the underground tubes, they get back to the lab, and they manage to, like, come up with a plan to get back to the surface. Of course, we have tons of back and forth, with Hunter being like, oh, you didn't have to join the Empire, you could have chosen, and Cross's being like, yeah, well, you chose wrong anyway, you guys are jerks for not rescuing me. And we get a lot of that throughout the episode.
There's also a lot of Omega being unable to let go.
I mean, props to her for actually, like, being heroic and everything. Like, she actually saves Crosshairs from drowning, which ends up being a good thing in the end. But at the same time, like, her self-sacrificing almost gets her killed. Because one of the final steps in them escaping underwater is they have to go inside the medical tubes, like the little capsule things, which theoretically would float them back up to the surface once they were out in open water.
Problem is, there's so much debris, so...
And of course, EZ is running on batteries, which he didn't bother to power up at all while he was in hiding. He, unfortunately, is like running on fumes as he's trying to guide their capsules to the surface so they're not pinned. Omega almost gets pinned, and he just barely manages to free her before his batteries run out. I honestly thought we were going to lose him, because I'm like, there's no way they can keep this character around, right? I know it's an unfortunate, like, trope with droids, especially in the Star Wars universe, where they kind of get sacrificed in favor of the humans, because, you know, they're robots, and while they do have personalities and feelings, they're, like, considered less than, like, actual organic life. But in this case, like, Omega actually gets out of her capsule to rescue him as he's sinking. And keep in mind, he's a droid. And
he's gonna weigh her down.
Yeah, like, even though he normally hovers, he's not hovering now, and he's, like, pulling her down to the deep depths, like, to a point where, theoretically, her lungs could have been crushed for how deep she went.
Somehow, Crosshairs, with his freaking abilities, manages to see the two of them and fires a freaking grappling gun and gets them to safety.
Grappling gun!
I'm like, I knew he was skilled, but damn!
That move was sick. And it's like, I would normally call bullshit, but we've seen what he can do. And I'm like, you know what? I buy it. I think it's kind of bullshit given how far up they were, the physics of the water.
How the hell he managed to see them that far down.
The fact that he didn't catch on any debris, I'm like, Jesus, he is activating his
and
God mode powers.
And it's incredibly dark.
I'm like, Jesus, dude. It's like, too bad they don't have him on their side anymore. You imagine how quick quick Star Wars would be over if they actually utilized his skills properly. You could have taken out Palpatine like that before he even knew what was going on. Yeah, so Crosshairs manages to rescue Omega. They make it back to the ship, and once again, Hunter tries to offer Crosshairs the chance to rejoin them, because he's separated from the Empire now, and they've managed to essentially become even by rescuing each other. But Crosshairs still insists on staying with the Empire. It's just, to him, that's what he believes in. That's his goal. He believes he knows what he's doing in order to stay relevant, and he just goes his separate ways.
Yeah, although there is a bit of doubt on his expression.
He sticks to his guns.
Yeah. When you see him in the end, he doesn't seem quite so sure of things.
And it's understandable, because for the last 2 episodes, not only was he calling them out for not coming to rescue him, calling them out for going against what they were designed to do, but he was also legitimately trying to convince them to join the Empire with them, because they are his brothers, and they're
the only ones he gets along with.
Yeah, the only ones who basically tolerate him and that he can tolerate. So I think to a degree he was upset and crushed that they didn't join him. But at this point, he should realize that there's no way that they would serve the Empire. It just wasn't in their code. And I guess it makes him wonder if he ever actually, knew them. They obviously didn't know him. They didn't expect him to betray them and willingly join the Empire. So I guess it was a lot of revelations all around. It was like, oh, I thought I knew you. I thought I knew you. And even Omega, pleads with him and still reminds him that despite everything, despite whatever side they're on, they're all still siblings. And whether or not that is going to remain the case with them now being firmly on separate sides, I mean, we'll have to see that in the 2nd season. I'm wondering how the hell he's going to get off the planet now. Is he just going to hang out there till, a scout comes around? What the fuck?
Who knows?
But yeah, this finale, like I said, was definitely a turning point, both for the movies, the Clone Wars series, and everything that's to come. Because we know that there's always a definitive point in regards to each of the trilogies, in regards to the series. We know there's always that point where things change, whether or not they're for good or bad.
Yep.
And this was, for the batch, that was that point.
The whole time it's been the transition from Republic to Empire, and this, for all intents and purposes, seals that. You even see, when the fleet is firing on Kamino, there is that one clone trooper aboard the ship, very melancholy about the whole thing. he knows, following orders, but...
He just watched his home get destroyed.
Yeah, this just became real for him. You could bet that trooper's probably thinking about where his place in things is right now.
I mean, I'm wondering how all the clones are going to react once they hear the news, because that is like one thing that I guess separates the clones from all the others, is that they value loyalty above everything else. I mean, even Crosshairs, for as much as a jerky that he is, he does value loyalty. Like, when Omega saved him, he went out of his way to save her. When, the Batch actually, covered his ass from being shot, he covered them back. So that's pretty much the only thing that's really ingrained in their DNA, no matter what side they're on. But I just wonder how that's going to be tested later on between them, because they're officially enemies now. They know that there's no, coercion on play in terms of Crosshairs. He unambiguously is against them. Ooh, that is going to set a real depressing precedent for everything. I'm just wondering what the heck's going to happen from here on out, because ultimately Kamino's destroyed, so there's no going back there, and there's no worry for Omega at this point that she's going to be captured and sent back, because I think she's out of the equation now.
Not necessarily, because Nala Se's still in the picture, so who knows what could happen. Plus, she got transferred to that facility. Was that the same place that Gregor was at?
Possible. It looked like the same place, but I'm not sure. I was so overwhelmed with everything else I didn't really get a good look.
But there was the woman that greeted Nala Se. They may still want Omega in terms of, the project for whatever cloning estimating could be the clones of the Emperor.
Well, I mean, that kind of goes without saying, because we know that by the time we get to Mandalorian, his clones are, in full development. I don't know, I mean, maybe she might still go after Omega for, the basic sample, but at the same time, she's been shown to care about Omega, so she might try to protect her. Again, we're not sure. There's, so much uncertainty at this point, and the Batch still has to return back to Sid, who's probably pissed as all hell that they didn't complete that one mission. Mm-hmm. And I guess they're even more danger now, because Kamino isn't on their ass anymore, but the Empire, man...
The Empire is in full swing now.
Yeah, and with Crosshairs now firmly against them in all senses, just... they're gonna have a hard time dodging everything. So yeah, I guess I'll give my assessment of, Season 1 overall. I still very much like it. For someone who jumped into this with only the bare minimum knowledge of the Clone Wars and Rebels, it was fairly easy to follow. Because it hits a lot of the points that any casual fan would know. And granted, they do throw a lot of references to Clone Wars that you would have to see the series to fully grasp, but at the same time, you understand the characters and what their motivations are, where they're coming from, and how they're important to the overall history and story of Star Wars. Like I said, it's in my opinion, a lot easier to follow than Clone Wars, because you don't have the cast of thousands where you're jumping around to several different characters on several different missions and stuff. You just follow this group.
And it feels like there's an order to things, whereas... Let's face it, Clone Wars is a bit of a jumbled mess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still maintain that the first, I want to say maybe 4 or 5 seasons is kind of hard to watch, just because it feels like just a sequence of events with a bunch of different characters that, while it's going on in the same universe, it doesn't really connect to anything other than, this takes place in this universe during this time frame. But yeah, this is a lot better. I mean, I guess my only complaint would be lack of character development. We do get some, but it's not like any of the Batch get their own individual episode where they work on themselves and they are a little different than when they started. And I know that's a little hard for clones, considering, they're programmed to do certain things and think certain ways and all that, but I imagine now that their chips are permanently gone and they can basically be free and do as they please, this is probably going to be them exploring what they can be, what they can do outside of being soldiers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I very much enjoyed this this season, and yeah, I think, having the 16 episodes and you're just focusing on just these characters all the time versus the ever rotating roster that of Clone Wars, and the fact that we've got these wholly original characters. Granted, they were carryovers from the last season of Clone Wars, but for all intents and purposes, they are original. That was a problem with Clone Wars, is that you already have these established characters as the one that we're following. It made its strength when you have, characters introduced like Ahsoka and Rex and a lot of the clones. And then, a little more focus on some of the Jedi and characters that didn't really get a lot of focus. That was where a lot of the strength of the Clone Wars was. You take that and, from that and Rebels, you carry that over and have these original characters, you don't know what's going to happen with them. There's no pre-established story. They don't show up in the main movies. And they're going through this transition period from the Republic to the Empire, and that they are fugitives watching all these different planets, trying to make a life in the universe with, whoever they can find to actually ally with properly. Who can they trust? I think it's great. I'm fascinated by their journey. I want to learn about them. You've got clones, but they've got personalities.
Yeah.
And especially with, Wrecker. You love them.
Yeah, I will admit, I kind of wish we saw the episode of the Bad Batch in Clone Wars before we saw this series, just because even though I like Wrecker throughout this, seeing him in that first initial episode really is what bought me on him, because he has so much glee about him when he's going head first into these battles and everything. And that's kind of something I also miss in this series, because in their first episode, you see what distinguishes them from the rest of the clones. They dive head first, guns a-blazing, stabbing shit, using their specialized skills to take down and decimate all of the clankers. And it's amazing to watch, and they're so good at it. And you don't see a lot of that in the series, unfortunately, because they have a kid with them, so they have to restrain themselves. Plus, they're fugitives, so they can't draw too much attention.
And you can see why Echo wants to join them, and why Rex is happy to let him, and not only happy he encourages him to join the Bad Batch.
Yeah.
Feels like you make a good team.
It honestly makes sense why they got their own spin-off episode, because you can tell that the writers, they put so much into these characters to make them different, make them badass, and you only get them for 3 episodes. Yeah. So the fact that they are now dedicating those series, that makes so much more sense now. But
then again, I'm going to take a wild guess, given that the last season, which introduces the Bad Batch, came out a year ago.
So it was purposely setting up.
I think it was purposely setting up for the spin-off.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't hurt it so much. Honestly, watching the Bad Batch before watching their introduction in the Clone Wars didn't really hurt anything for me. I didn't really feel like I had been missing out too much. I could definitely recommend, watching this without having watched the Clone Wars. But of course, it certainly helps to know who they are.
I don't know, it just felt like it added a little bit more. And I wonder how it would have been had we watched them without prior knowledge. Because the way that they're setting up, it's they're the bad boys of all the clone troopers, and they don't play by the rules, and they go in hard. And when you see it, it's yeah, they kind of are, but at the same time, they're more likable than you think that they would be. Because you think that being bad boys, they'd have attitudes, and they don't work well with the others, and they're kind of assholes. And granted, Crosshairs was an asshole, but for the most part, they are still troopers who respect and work well with their brothers. That at least fits in continuity. I still have no regrets about the order that we watched it in. And again, I'm glad we finished it before we got to the finale, because I think it made the ending that much more impactful.
Yeah. And plus, not knowing whether or not there was going to be more than just the first season. At first, I'm wondering, okay, it's just going to be miniseries, and, they're kind of done. And then as you go along, it's I really kind of want more with these characters. I want to see more of their stories, how they go on. And I'm very glad that we're getting a second season.
Yeah, at this point, it's all a matter of what else is going to happen, because there are still plenty of characters from Clone Wars whose fates we don't know about. I know some of them show up in Rebels, but there are others that they don't die, but we don't know ultimately what happens to them between that point and then all the other movies and series that we've seen so far. So I'm interested to see whether they're going to tackle that. Because if they can bring back friggin' Cad Bane, they can bring back other characters. They can bring back Ventress. I like to see her as doing her bounty hunter thing. Like I said, there's like so much they can address, and like I said, lingering plot lines that they can wrap up theoretically. And yes, while we don't know the exact date yet of when season 2 is, we're not done with videos. Like we said, we are going to be doing a review of Clone Wars because we've already had so much to say in this video alone. We have even more to say about the whole thing in general. I think it definitely deserves its own proper analysis, and given this is a prequel to The Bad Batch, it only makes sense. We're also in the midst of watching Rebels, or at least
rewatching for me, watching for the first time for her.
Yeah, and like I said, I've only seen a handful, and I kind of know how a lot of things end, but I don't know the full scope of it. So yeah, it's a bit first run through for me. But point is, we are going to be talking about that once we finish it as well. So expect those 2 videos at some point in the future. That I'm still working on getting all the backlog done, so I assume we're going to have plenty of time in between seasons.
Plus we've got Book of Boba Fett to look forward to, and Mandalorian Season 3 coming up.
Yeah, there's no shortage of Star Wars. There never will be. And we still have all the other ones yet to come out. The Kenobi series, the Ahsoka series. So much coming out, and we'll tackle it one by one as they come. But at least now we have actual backstory and context for the initial Clone Wars. But until next time, when we analyze more clones, I'm Kat MacBerrie.
I'm Doug MacBerrie.
And Wrecker, we got a present for you. This is the happiest day of my life.